It's really necessary if you write enterprise level applications with scripting languages. To also make the software a lot easier to maintain. So even while you're investing a lot of time upfront, by thinking about things, you'll basically win back that during maintenance or later on in the process. They always say that, for example, if you spend an extra hour on just the requirements phase, just 1 extra hour, that can save you up to 100 hours in the development phase. So if you say, hey, let's just skip requirements analysis, let's not do that, or let's not spend that extra hour, then something will hit you later on in the project and you will run into problems. And solving problems later on in the project is always more expensive because there are a lot more things you have to take into account, a lot more changes you have to check. So just make sure you invest that time up front because you will save it later. All of these things are part of what's also called a development methodology. And a classic development methodology is a waterfall model. And a waterfall model basically says, you do requirements, then you do a technical architecture, then you implement software, then you test it, and then you're done. Basically, that has never really worked in IT. Basically, what always happens is that when you think you're done, actually the problems start because somewhere down the line the requirements didn't match what the customer was asking. Something went wrong during the development phase. You have to fix things. What happens a lot with the waterfall model is that you run over budget and you run out of time. You need a lot more cost, to write something. If you run into those problems, it's really useful to look at agile methodologies, and DSDM, XP, and Scrum are just examples of those. But agile methodologies basically say, hey, don't work with a waterfall model, but work iteratively. Just basically do a small bit of design first, small bit of architecture, small bit of application development and testing, and then you do that iteratively in cycles. And each cycle you just add features and you repeat the process. Big advantage of that is that you have earlier feedback from your customer. Instead of just going back and developing something for 6 months and then presenting that to the customer and have the customer say, that's not really what I wanted. When you do agile development, each iteration, for example, every week or every 2 weeks, you have feedback from the customer. You see all the features that you've added, and you can get immediate feedback from the customer. So it's a lot more useful. Again, if you look up agile at Wikipedia or something, you'll get a lot of details on that and book recommendations. All of the steps that we've discussed are basically part of what's called a software development lifecycle, the lifecycle of a software application. And there are a lot of documents and a lot of books written on that subject, and you don't have to reinvent all those wheels. You don't have to say, hey, let's find out how we have to do testing, and let's find out how we have to do design. Basically, there are existing methods, and you can learn from the experts. You can basically read a book and see how other people are doing this, or how other people are solving real-life problems with these steps. It's also important that once you've made decisions on, let's do unit testing, but let's skip a bit of the logging. You've made some decisions on what your development lifecycle looks like. It's important to document it, because if you add new developers, if you get new co-workers, it's a lot easier to instruct them to work the right way if you have documentation that tells them, this is how we do it at this company, this is how we do testing, this is how we do development. But just documenting makes it so much easier for new people to get into the process, because otherwise you're reinventing the wheel every time you add a new developer to the team. And it's really important, to make that life cycle the cornerstone of your development efforts, because basically that is your assurance that you are delivering quality and that you are delivering in time and that you are exactly delivering what the customer wants. So everything you do should fit within that development life cycle. Obviously, we skipped a lot of things. There are a lot more things to think about. For example, planning we haven't discussed yet, but it's interesting to look at. The actual coding, we haven't discussed any of the actual coding, but there are a lot of challenges during development and coding. The implementation, and implementation I don't mean coding, but I mean implementing an application within an organization, giving user training, etc. And things like security are also important things to look at. But it's all more than I can fit in this 1-hour presentation. But if I may make a shameless plug, I've written a book about this subject, where I cover all these things that we've mentioned, and where I also cover the things that I don't have time for in this presentation. It's written for PHP developers, but what you'll see is that even if you're a Perl developer or a Python developer, a lot of these steps are really generic, and they're not really, written for specific languages. So even if my examples are PHP, it might still be useful to have a look at the book, because it just describes all these processes. That basically sums up the things I had to say about enterprise development of scripting languages. If you have questions, you'll get the chance to ask them, of course. But if you have questions after this session, just drop me an email. I have a website with a blog where you can send me a comment. We have a company website, ibuildings.com, where you can see about how we are doing things, what processes we are implementing, and how we can help you implement those processes. You can also follow both my company and myself on Twitter if you want to stay up to date with. If I discover something, if I see an interesting tool that fits within this model, I say, hey, there's a nice new testing tool available, I will just drop that on my Twitter. Do any of you have any questions at this point? Don't be shy, just shout. Okay, if you have any questions during the day, I will be here, so just find me and just ask your question. Well, thanks a lot.